It was just before dawn at a high-security prison in southeast London. Gates clanged shut. Targets of the United Kingdom's most serious criminal laws were counted into their cells. These were not ordinary prisoners, they were individuals held on terrorism charges, organized crime convictions, and offenses judged the most dangerous to society. Inside the razor-wire perimeter, walls 6 feet thick, and dozens of locked doors, no prisoner has ever escaped this complex in more than 30 years. Even the most notorious inmate, once dubbed Britain's most violent, has never walked free from here. But why does this prison have a reputation so severe that critics call it Belmarsh? What legal and historical forces carved out a place where release is rare, escape is unheard of, and controversy often follows each decision inside these walls? What happens next, when the outside world watches but few know the inside, is a story of law, security, and consequence. This documentary tells the real, verified story of His Majesty's Prison Belmarsh, one of the United Kingdom's highest security prisons. We will explore why this facility holds some of the country's most serious offenders, how its legal and security frameworks developed, and what life inside has meant for inmates, officers, and the wider system. This account is based entirely on factual, verified events and reporting from public records, legal cases, government inspection reports, and historical documentation. There is no sensationalism here, only a clear look at how this prison operates, how it came to symbolize maximum security in Britain, and why its gates rarely open to release those within. We begin with the origins of Belmarsh's reputation and how its role evolved after it opened in the early 1990s. From London's new prison to category A fortress. When HMP Belmarsh opened in 1991, it was the first men's prison built in London in more than a century. Designed to house the most serious offenders, it was constructed with multiple layers of security, long perimeter walls, and a segregated high-security unit meant for inmates who posed extraordinary risk. Belmarsh was quickly designated a Category A prison, the highest classification in England and Wales. That meant individuals held here were judged to be those whose escape must be made impossible. Guards, legal authorities, and the prison service all operated under that same principle: containment above all else. In its early years, Belmarsh housed individuals connected to armed Irish Republican groups, and later became a secure location for people charged with terrorism, organized crime, and threats to national security. This drew national attention to the facility, not simply for the crimes the inmates were accused of, but for the conditions under which they were held and how British law treated them. By the early 2000s, Belmarsh was at the center of a major legal case involving the rights of non-citizens detained without trial under anti-terror laws. A group of men were held there under special immigration provisions, not formally charged, and challenged their detention under human rights law. The resulting case reached the European Court and shaped how indefinite detention without trial was viewed in UK law. The prison's role therefore extended beyond confinement. It became a symbol of how the UK balanced security and legal rights in the post-9/11 world. But held within its walls were individual stories, policies, and controversies that grew more complex as time went on. A prison at the center of legal, security, and human rights debate. By the 2000s, HMP Belmarsh had solidified its role as Britain's most secure adult male prison, not just by design but by who was sent there and why. Across its high-security wings, including an inner prison within a prison, it housed offenders judged to pose exceptional risk because of the gravity of their convictions and their potential threat to others. It was here that several high-profile individuals, from convicted terrorists to notorious criminals, were detained while awaiting trial or serving sentences. The facility's reputation for security was known across the justice system. No prisoner has ever escaped from Belmarsh's Category A estate, even though some inmates tried. This extreme security, razor wire, multiple controlled access points, and constant monitoring, made Belmarsh a logical location for the most serious cases, but it also placed the prison at the center of debates about civil liberties and state power. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, the UK government introduced new laws designed to prevent terrorism. Under the Anti-Terrorism, Crime and Security Act 2001, foreign nationals suspected of terrorism were detained in Belmarsh without formal charges or trial, based on risk to national security. This policy led to one of the most important legal challenges in modern British history. A group of detainees known in court records as A, and others challenged their detention all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. The court found in 2009 that holding them indefinitely without trial breached fundamental protections against unlawful detention. The ruling did not focus on individual guilt or innocence. Instead, it put a spotlight on how far a democratic society can go in restricting liberty in the name of security, and what due process must remain, even in times of heightened fear. At the same time, real operational challenges persisted inside the prison. Some reports highlighted the difficulties of managing a population that included both convicted terrorists and dangerous offenders, as well as ordinary criminal suspects awaiting trial. Authorities shared intelligence with outside police to manage risks, but critics argued that prisons were not always equipped to address broader issues like radicalization or psychological harm. Belmarsh's role as a hub for terrorism cases also meant it became a place where many legal, security, and human rights questions intersected, not just about confinement, but about how the justice system balances protection with fairness. And yet, the prison's challenges continued to evolve, not just in law but in everyday life inside its walls. Life behind the walls, pressure, people, and persistent strain. HMP Belmarsh is more than a fortress of steel and concrete. It is a community of staff, prisoners, and the unbroken routines that govern day-to-day life. But in recent years, reports from independent observers and official boards have underscored pressures inside its walls that reflect much broader challenges across the UK prison system. Belmarsh's role as a high-security facility means it holds offenders convicted of very serious crimes alongside those on remand awaiting trial. In recent annual reports by the Independent Monitoring Board, officials highlighted that the prison was not sufficiently resourced for the complex needs of some of its population. Young adults, for example, were held in environments originally designed for older, seasoned offenders, placing extra strain on staff and complicating efforts to provide meaningful activities and support. According to these reports, incidents of violence increased, and a higher number of weapons were found within the prison. The number of prisoners with significant mental health needs waiting for transfer to secure hospital care was also a growing concern, with individuals often waiting far beyond target times for placement. Independently published data also shows that Belmarsh's population includes a higher proportion of prisoners from diverse backgrounds and those with complex health needs. In one reporting period, a substantial percentage of inmates were noted to have conditions such as neurodiversity or mental health concerns, challenging staff to balance security with welfare support. Staff shortages have compounded these challenges. Recruitment and retention of permanent officers remain ongoing issues, limiting the availability of escorts for external appointments and reducing flexibility in managing daily routines. Healthcare services, including mental health provision, were affected by changes in providers and a lack of specialist staff, leading to delays in treatment and assessment for some prisoners. These stresses are not unique to Belmarsh, but its profile as a Category A prison, with some of the most serious offenders in the country, magnifies them. One recent parliamentary discussion revealed that assaults on prison staff had risen sharply across England and Wales, prompting debate about protective measures and officer safety. Incidents inside Belmarsh occasionally make national headlines. For example, a life-sentenced inmate convicted of a high-profile triple murder allegedly poured boiling water on a prison officer during an altercation at the prison in 2025. Such events put a spotlight on the reality that even in the most secure prisons, maintaining order and safety is a constant task requiring skill and vigilance. Despite these pressures, independent reports also record positive developments. An expanded key worker program designed to build one-to-one support between officers and prisoners, more opportunities for lawful activity, and ongoing efforts to promote equality within the institution. Within these walls, the everyday challenges of managing a high-security prison continue to intersect with wider debates about rehabilitation, mental health, safety, and the role of confinement in a democratic society. The names that made Belmarsh famous. Belmarsh is not only known for its walls, its security, or its legal controversies. It is known because of the people who have been held inside. Over time, the prison became linked to some of the most widely reported criminal and political cases in modern British history. Many of these individuals were not just serving sentences, they were part of stories that drew international attention, media pressure, and political debate. One of the most famous names associated with Belmarsh is Ronnie Kray, one half of the infamous Kray twins. Kray, a major figure in London organised crime during the 1950s and 1960s, was transferred to Belmarsh late in his life. He died there in 1995. His presence reinforced the prison's reputation as a place reserved for the most dangerous and notorious offenders. But in the decades that followed, Belmarsh became known for a different kind of prisoner, those linked to terrorism and national security. Among the most prominent cases were individuals connected to extremist networks, including prisoners convicted of major terrorist attacks and plots. Belmarsh became a holding location for people involved in cases tied to the 2005 London bombings investigation and other major security trials. For prison staff, this created a unique challenge. Unlike traditional organized crime inmates, terrorism-related prisoners often carried ideological motivations, international attention, and high-risk classifications. But the case that pushed Belmarsh into global headlines was not a convicted terrorist. It was Julian Assange. Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, was held in Belmarsh beginning in 2019 after being arrested in London. His detention sparked worldwide controversy. Supporters argued he was being punished for publishing information. Critics argued he had endangered national security and broken the law. His legal battle over extradition to the United States turned Belmarsh into an international symbol of political and legal conflict. Belmarsh, a prison built to contain violent criminals and terrorism suspects, was now being discussed in global debates about press freedom, whistleblowing, and state secrecy. And it didn't stop there. Belmarsh has also held individuals involved in major criminal trials connected to gang violence, firearms trafficking, and organized crime networks, cases where courts believed extreme security was necessary due to the risk of retaliation, escape attempts, or public danger. Every high-profile inmate increased Belmarsh's visibility. And with visibility came pressure. Because when the world knows who is behind those walls, the prison is no longer just a correctional facility. It becomes a political battlefield, a symbol, and sometimes a target. And that raised the next major question for the British prison system. If Belmarsh is meant to hold the most dangerous prisoners in the country, what happens when its own security is tested? When the fortress is tested? For decades, HMP Belmarsh built its reputation on one key fact. It was a prison designed to prevent the impossible. High walls, reinforced gates, constant surveillance, controlled movement, strict prisoner separation, and a system built around one clear principle: Category A inmates must never escape. And in one sense, the record speaks for itself. Belmarsh has held some of the most dangerous individuals in the UK prison system, and no prisoner has ever escaped directly from Belmarsh itself. But that does not mean the system has never been tested. Because the true pressure point in modern high-security imprisonment is not always the prison walls. It is what happens when prisoners must leave them. High-risk inmates often need court appearances, medical appointments, legal meetings, or transfers between facilities. And each time a prisoner is moved, the prison's security becomes dependent on something larger: transport logistics, staffing levels, intelligence, and coordination across multiple agencies. That is where the cracks can appear. In 2023, Britain was shaken by the escape of Daniel Abed Khalife, a former British soldier accused of terrorism-related offences. Khalife escaped from HMP Wandsworth by reportedly attaching himself to the underside of a prison delivery vehicle. The story made international headlines not only because of the escape itself, but because it raised a disturbing question. How could someone accused of terrorism evade the prison system so easily? Almost immediately, public attention turned toward Belmarsh. Because many people asked the same thing. Why wasn't he being held in the UK's most secure prison? Commentators and journalists began comparing prisons like Wandsworth, an overcrowded Victorian-era facility, with modern Category A institutions like Belmarsh. The case became a symbol of how national security risks do not only depend on the severity of charges, but on prison capacity, classification decisions, and system-wide resources. In other words, Belmarsh may be a fortress, but the UK prison system is only as strong as its weakest link. And Belmarsh itself has faced security concerns in different ways. Not through escapes, but through internal pressures. Independent monitoring reports have repeatedly warned that violence, contraband, and staffing challenges have increased in recent years. These are not the kinds of threats that break a wall down overnight. They are slower, more systemic, and harder to control. Because when staff shortages limit supervision, when prison wings run at full capacity, and when inmates spend long hours locked in cells, tension builds. And tension, in a high-security environment, does not stay quiet for long. Belmarsh is often described as one of the most secure prisons in Britain. But security is not only about walls and locks. It is about control. And control is something a prison must constantly fight to maintain, every day, every hour, every movement. The truth is, the prison system is not tested only by dramatic escapes. It is tested by routine strain. And as Belmarsh's population pressures increased, the next problem became harder to ignore. What happens when the most secure prison in the UK starts struggling with the same overcrowding and resource issues as everyone else? Why so few truly leave Belmarsh? By the time most prisoners arrive at HMP Belmarsh, the story of their freedom is often already close to its end. Not because Belmarsh secretly keeps people forever. Not because it operates outside the law. But because the prison was built for one specific category of inmate, the kind the British justice system considers too dangerous to hold anywhere else. Belmarsh is a Category A prison, meaning it houses individuals whose escape would pose a serious threat to the public or the state. Many are convicted of terrorism offenses, murder, serious organized crime, or violent repeat offending. For these inmates, leaving Belmarsh is not simply about good behavior. It is about legal reality. Some prisoners inside are serving life sentences, where release is possible only after many years and only if the parole board believes they no longer pose a serious danger. Others are serving whole life orders, meaning they will never be released unless exceptional circumstances occur. And some are not even convicted yet. Belmarsh also holds prisoners on remand, meaning they are awaiting trial. Some of these cases can take months or even years, especially when the evidence involves national security, international links, or complex criminal networks. To the outside world, that can create a strange impression. A prison where people arrive, disappear behind the walls, and rarely return. Not because the prison keeps them, but because the cases tied to Belmarsh are often the most serious cases in Britain. This is why its reputation became so powerful. Belmarsh is not designed to be temporary. It is designed to be the end of the road. And when you combine that with the modern pressures facing the UK prison system, overcrowding, staff shortages, rising violence, mental health crises, and stretched rehabilitation services, the result is a prison that feels to many inmates like a sealed world. Even the Independent Monitoring Board has repeatedly raised concerns about safety and conditions inside Belmarsh, warning that the prison continues to face major challenges, including increased violence and delays in mental health transfers. This is where Belmarsh becomes more than a prison. It becomes a warning sign. Because if even the UK's most secure facility struggles under pressure, then the problem is not only about individual prisoners. It is about the system itself. The real meaning of Hell Marsh. HMP Belmarsh is often called Hell Marsh by critics. But the truth is more complex than the nickname. Belmarsh is not feared because it is the most violent prison. It is feared because it represents something deeper. A place built to contain the people society believes cannot be trusted outside. A place where law, punishment, national security, and human rights collide. And a place where the cost of extreme security is measured not only in locks and walls, but in time, in isolation, in legal battles, in broken routines, and in the long reality that some prisoners will never return to normal life again. Because Belmarsh is not just a prison. It is the final checkpoint of the British justice system. And once someone is sent there, their future is no longer shaped by hope or second chances. It is shaped by courts, parole decisions, security classifications, and the hardest truth of all. Some people are sent to Belmarsh because the state believes they should never be allowed to walk freely again. And that is why, for many, no one truly leaves HMP Belmarsh. Not quickly, not easily, and sometimes, not ever. If you found this documentary informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and comment below. Do you think prisons like Belmarsh protect society, or do they reveal deeper problems inside the justice system?